Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to OpenMicVO. My name is Graham Spicer. So glad that you're here with us tonight. Want to go over just a couple of things before we get started. This event on Sunday evenings is all about us getting together as a community and sharing ideas, helping each other out with information. The very best open mic, as far as I'm concerned, is one where I'm not heard very much. So really, I want to promote that everybody should share and everybody should feel free and comfortable asking questions. We feature a different topic each week. Tonight, we're going to be talking about recording technology, anything that has anything to do with recording voiceover at home. So, whether it's equipment, whether it's software, maybe it's plugins, maybe we're talking about acoustical treatment. Those are all fair game for conversations tonight. This group's all about being supportive of each other and positive. I don't want any kind of negativity here. There's lots of Facebook groups for that. Um, People here tonight are at all different stages of their careers, but that doesn't mean that everyone here is not a professional. And I would expect that everyone gets treated as a professional. And those of you who are new, I want to reassure you that there's no such thing as a silly question. So here's the rules. They're really simple. Mute yourself if you're not actively participating in the conversation. I want you to definitely participate as much as you possibly can, but if you're not actively speaking, please mute yourself using the little icon, little microphone icon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. If you don't do that, we get dogs barking and kids running through the background and keyboard tapping and feedback and echo, and it's really difficult for the rest of us to continue the conversation. Be nice. That's rule number 2. Be nice. And rule number 3 is we're recording and it's going to get posted to YouTube. So just remember, anything that you have to say will make it onto YouTube, and I have no control over where it ends up then. Also want to take a minute to thank VoiceZam for sponsoring OpenMicVO tonight. VoiceZam is a unique demo player that, amongst many other things, allows people listening to your demo to really hone in on very specific segments. It's hard to explain, but if you go to voicezam.com and look at Bob Merkel's video explaining this, it'll all become crystal clear, and it's a really, really cool product. So go check out VoiceZam at voicezam.com. Use promo code OpenMic, OPENMIC, and Bob is going to double your initial trial period. So OpenMic is the promo code to use. So we're going to get started. Tonight's topic, VO recording technology, equipment, software, acoustics. Once you see that I've unmuted you, please feel free to start us off with the first question, or to give us the first story, or tell us something new and exciting you've heard about VO equipment. Just remember to mute yourself in the lower left-hand corner if you're not going to be speaking right away. The other thing I should note is that if you are not using the very latest version of the Zoom app on your computer, when I can't unmute you. You know, I will unmute you, but it still won't let you speak. So if you are not using the most up-to-date version of Zoom, quit out of this webinar. Go and download the latest version of Zoom, and it's quite easy to find. I think it's zoom.us/support/downloads, or download/support, one or the other. It installs just like that, and then you can rejoin us here at OpenMic. So I'm going to start unmuting people. And once you see you're unmuted, either mute yourself or get us started. This does take a second because I have to do everybody one by one. So once again, once you see that you're unmuted, if you want to ask the first question, throw it out there. Let's get it started.
I'll get us started. Mike here.
Hey, Mike, how's it going tonight?
It's going well, Graham. How about yourself?
Fantastic. Thanks for coming.
Mine's not so much a question as it is a survey. I'm curious how many people are using USB microphones that plug directly in via USB, as opposed to XLR or other connection through some sort of USB interface. I personally am using an XLR microphone through a professional USB interface.
So the question is, who out there is using USB, like a USB microphone, so a microphone that plugs directly into their computer rather than one that connects via an XLR cable? That's the one with the 3 little pins in it. So an XLR cable to a interface of some sort, which converts the analog signal to digital, and then it feeds it into your computer. Anyone out there using a USB mic? I know there's some really pretty good quality USB mics out there. Still trying to unmute people here. Sorry about that.
I use both.
Who's speaking?
This is Lynn Foley. Yeah, I use both.
So in what circumstances do you use one versus the other?
Well, I'll generally use the USB for auditions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go the other way. It just depends on the job. Like I'll use a different. Hi, Melinda. Oh, it's like the sound of the fairies. Are the fairies talking? Love it. I use different mics for just depending on the job. Like, for instance, I'll use a different mic for character work as compared to narration, that sort of thing.
So what USB mic do you own and that you use on occasion for auditions?
Well, I'm just going to fess up. I use a Yeti just for my regular auditions, and it's working really good.
You know, I've got this bias against blue microphones, and I think it's unfair. I think it's unfair because I know a bunch of people who are using Yetis. They're podcasting perhaps, or they're doing auditions, and some people are even using them for production work, that people that are getting started, and their stuff sounds good. Their stuff sounds just fine.
Shame on you.
Exactly. I mean, I shouldn't have this prejudice, clearly.
But you know, I used a Yeti on a film, a movie, and I can't, and I went to the theater. I went to the theater and sitting there, listening. It sounded great. And I was just like blown away because I was just kind of scrunching down in the chair and thinking, oh my goodness, how is it going to sound? And it sounded great. And it's kind of like I'm kind of like embarrassed in my dirty little secret, but I have to admit, yeah, I use it quite frequently.
You know, Lynn, what this goes to prove is that it's got little to do with the equipment and everything to do with the performance as to whether it's going to be considered successful or not. So.
All with your big mouth. That's what it is.
Yeah, I admit to being a musician, I have a bias against USB microphones. I don't know why, I just do.
It's interesting that the USB microphones use the same capsules as the XLR microphones. The difference is they have internal converters that are not of the same quality that you would get with an external with the USB interface. Other than that, they're probably 90%. So
yeah, that's exactly right. It's the electronics that's different, not the capsule.
Yeah. You know, the thing I find about USB microphones, though, is that if I have a regular condenser microphone and it's plugged into an interface and then that's plugged into my computer, if something goes wrong, if there's something wrong with the conversion, I know I can always you know, swap out a piece of equipment or something, versus if everything's all in one cylinder and something goes wrong, then you've got nothing to fall back on. So
then you're doomed. No, just kidding. I just want to say, I had a coach, and he was hounding people. Oh, you got to get a mic, and you got to, you know, get on these pay to plays and blah blah. And your problem is you just need a mic. And I'm like, well, I don't know what kind to get. He says, well, get a blue Yeti. No, get a blue Yeti Pro. Those are better. I'm like, okay. So I wound up getting one, and some time went on, and I found out I could have spent quite a bit less and gotten a different name, if you will, one not so well known or something, you know, not a blue. And I suppose it would have been just as well. I like it, but and that's all I have, and that's all I know. Also, I'm not techie, and I was on a webinar, I guess like this, maybe a year ago or something, and people were, they just someone said something like, "Whatever you use, don't ever use a USB mic. Oh, they're the worst, and they pick up everything." And I'm thinking, are you kidding? I mean, I don't know. I've got one, and I don't know. I feel it's pretty satisfactory.
Well, and that's incorrect information. A USB microphone is not going to pick up any more or any less information in your recording space than a similar, like,
Mm-hmm.
and a similar condenser microphone. So, like, for example, like the Audio-Technica 2020 is a very popular, inexpensive microphone. And
Mm-hmm.
there is an Audio-Technica 2020 USB version as well.
Mm.
But as I think it was William had stated just a minute ago, that it's the exact same capsule. It's picking up the exact same stuff, the exact same noises. It's just whether the conversion is being done in the body of the microphone or it's being done in a separate digital interface. That's all. So you know, that in that particular case, you were given some wrong information, unfortunately.
I can appreciate what you were saying though a minute ago about, you know, if you have one that's not a USB and something falls apart, you know, this piece versus that piece, you can handle it yourself. Versus if you have an all-in-one, you know, then what are you going to do? And you got to call the company and this and that. So that sounds like maybe something I'd like to get involved with.
It's also an upgrade thing, right? I mean, you can't really upgrade a USB microphone.
Right. Can't do anything to it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what you get is what you get. And some of these USB microphones, like I know, I mean, the story is infamous of Joe Cipriano, who's a well-known voice actor working out of LA. And he does a lot of TV promo work for big networks. And he had to do a TV promo in the backseat of a rental car with one of these tiny little Apogee mics, which is, you know,
Wow.
they're literally, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches tall, and they have something like a 3/4 inch capsule in this tiny little head basket, and it sounded fantastic. So, you know, it's easy for us all to poo-poo USB microphones and get all snobby about them, but they do sound just fine in many cases. The problem is there's not much of an upgrade path.
Well, in with using a USB interface, one thing I really like, again, I guess this goes back to my roots as a musician, is I have flexibility. I've got, I guess I've got 3 or 4 different condenser microphones plus some dynamic microphones here in my studio that I can use any of them just by simply plugging them in to the same USB interface. Whereas if I had a USB mic, I just have the USB mic. Now, I would like to have, in fact, I was just looking at price ranges of some of these. It would be great to have a USB mic for the times when maybe you need to travel and you might have to throw something down, do an audition or something while you're on the road. I can't really carry my big rack-mounted USB interface with me everywhere I go.
Well, there's something to be said about one of those little Apogee MICs, Apogee mic. It literally fits in this tiny little bag. You can carry it with you. It plugs into your iPhone or your iPad, and it sounds fantastic. And it's sub $200. I think in most places are advertising it for $199. It's a pretty good deal.
That sounds kind of nicer than the Blue Yeti Pro, which is I keep thinking, what if I have to travel with this? I'm going to die. I mean, it's kind of cumbersome looking, you know.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to carry around, that's for certain.
Yeah, I think I might be interested in that one you mentioned.
Okay, Apogee, Apogee, and it's capital M, lowercase I, capital C. I'm not sure what that stands for, but you know, mic, Apogee mic, and they're readily available. You can find them on Amazon and you know, Sweetwater or B&H. Any one of those retailers would be able to help you out.
Thanks.
Who else has got a question tonight about technology? Anything to do with home recording, software, acoustics, hardware? I'm just trying to unmute a few more people here. If you see that you have not been unmuted, it's because I can't. You need to upgrade to the latest version of the Zoom software in order for me to be able to unmute you and for you to be able to speak. So if you are not unmuted, it's because I'm unable to. Just pop out of the webinar for 3 minutes, go download the latest version of Zoom, and then come on back in.
Hi, Graham. I have a question.
Hey, Haley.
Hi. I have a question about file types when you're sending a file to a client. Generally, WAV files are what I will send to my clients. And if they don't have an FTP site, I will send it through something like Hightail. But I'm just wondering if anyone else uses a different file transfer site that works well for them.
I use Dropbox, and I have for several years, and it's always been flawless. But there's so many of those file transfer sites now. I mean, and a lot of them are built into, like the Microsoft ecosystem has their own, and Google has Google Drive, and so there's a number of them out there. I like the way that Dropbox is being integrated into like the Apple operating system is getting closer, more tightly integrated with Dropbox, which I like. Who else has got one out there that they're using and they're happy with?
I've used Dropbox as well, and I've used Microsoft OneDrive. The thing to be careful of is make sure you actually read the terms and conditions on whatever site you want to use, because not all of them guarantee the privacy of your data, and that could be problematic depending upon your customer.
Certainly, if you've recorded something confidential, yeah, that could definitely be a problem. And I hadn't even considered that somehow my material wouldn't be protected. Can you name one of the services where you've run across the terms and conditions and it seems like your data is not protected?
Well, I can't guarantee this is current because I haven't checked recently, but at one point Google did not guarantee, in fact, they had it written into their terms and conditions that stuff you shared via their sites, which in this case would be Google Drive we're talking about, they can use. You give them rights to use whatever you put there for marketing purposes. Now, again, that may not be current.
I'm just noticing here in the chat box that Mike Fox was quickly found a link for that Apogee mic and dropped it into the chat box, the link. So if those of you who are interested in that mic, Mike dropped it in there.
It's so little, it looks so appealing, and I figure I'll probably buy it and then lose it immediately, you know.
The only thing you need to remember with mics like that is that it comes with this little teeny tiny tripod. It's like the littlest, cutest tripod you've ever seen, and it's totally useless for us. So it's not enough to travel with that microphone. You also have to travel with some way of affixing it to
a mic stand.
A mic stand. Well, not like most hotel rooms have mic stands. You know what I have always done is I take the ironing board and I put the ironing board up on top of the desk, and then I drape a comforter over top of it, and then I use a clamp with a gooseneck on it, and that's what I put my mic on. And I clamp it to the ironing board leg.
Sounds like a plan.
The housekeeping people think you're nuts when you ask for the extra comforter, but they figure it out pretty quick when they come to clean your room the next morning.
They figure you're just playing with the tent with your kids.
Well, this guy is staying all by himself, and he's playing, tent.
making a tent for it.
A little creepy. Who else has got a question for us tonight, or a comment about some technology stuff? This is funny because this is normally a topic that everybody's got questions about. Everyone's being very shy tonight.
I'll shoot another question at you.
Well, you're welcome to. Hey, Haley.
Hi. Preamps. That is a part of my studio. I do not have a preamp. I don't really feel like I need one.
Well, you do have one.
Do I have one?
You do have one, but it's built into your digital interface.
Well, maybe that's the one that I don't even realize it's there. And, it's a steep learning curve, some of this stuff, too. So maybe don't fix it if it ain't broke.
The signal that comes out of a microphone is infinitesimally small, and it needs to be amplified up to line level in order for the digital converters or whatever to do something with it. So if you're old school, back in big recording studios, your mic always got fed into a preamp, and then the preamp would be fed into some big console. Even though consoles themselves usually had preamps built into them as well, but different engineers liked the way different preamps sounded. In your particular case, all of these digital interfaces have at least one preamp built right into them. So when you plug your mic into the digital interface,
yep,
it's amplifying that in tiny little electrical signal up to line level before it sends it off to the digital converters, which are also in the same box. So you do have a preamp. It's just built into the digital interface.
Good to know. I come from a musical background, so it seems like a preamp is something that's sort of standard in the studios that you work in, and so to go to the home studio, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, lots of voice actors out there do use mic preamps, separate mic preamps, and then feed them into separate boxes which do nothing but do digital conversion. They don't have any preamps built into them. And that's because some of them like the character of certain preamps versus others. Like there's a very popular preamp out there called the Avalon 737, and it has vacuum tubes in it, and lots of people like the way that particular preamp sounds with lots of different voiceover mics, and it's quite flattering on a lot of different voices. So that's why preamps are often talked about in voiceover circles. We don't always need a separate preamp. I've had very expensive preamps here in my studio at various points. I'm a bit of an idiot when it comes to buying gear. I've probably got 5 times more gear here than I actually need. But I now am feeding my mic directly into my Universal Audio Apollo digital interface, because I just didn't find that adding a preamp in the middle of all that improved my sound at all. So I chose to simplify and just plug it directly into the Apollo interface. Anybody out there have a preamp that they particularly like that is in their signal chain? Because I'm always curious to hear what preamps people are using.
I'm using a Solo 610 made by UA.
Mm-hmm.
It's on an old Putnam circuit. My question is that I've often wondered, because I run this one preamp into the preamps in my converters, and I was always a little concerned that I might be overdoing it electronically. So if anybody knows a little bit more about the technology, I'd be grateful. Basically, the problem of pre-amplifying a preamplifier.
Yeah, in most audio interfaces, you have the choice of a line level inputs or a mic level input. Yeah, you don't tend to want to have the output from a microphone preamp being fed into the inputs of a microphone preamp on the interface. And unfortunately, in many inexpensive interfaces, that's often what's happening. You want to get an interface that has separate line level inputs, and then you don't plug your mic into mic inputs. You plug it into the input on the mic preamp, and then the output from the mic preamp goes into the line inputs of your converter. Does that all make sense? I don't think I was very clear there, but
no, that does make sense. And I mean, I'm wondering if there's a way to bypass the preamps in the software interface that comes with it. I just
in the firmware, you mean? I've never seen that. I mean,
Well,
I guess it could be possible, but I've never seen that or heard of it.
Well, there is one way you can bypass a preamp if you have a gain control knob. You can't do it in the software because it's the preamp's hardware before it gets through the digital conversion, as Graham was saying. But if you have a gain control knob somewhere on your preamp, if you can turn that to 0 or U for unity, then it's not doing any amplification. So you've effectively bypassed that preamp.
Yeah, it's not bypassed though. You're still going through the preamp circuitry.
Yeah, that's true. You are going through the circuitry. However, you're not amplifying the signal. So
Correct.
that's as close as you can get to bypassing.
Very good. Thank you. I mean, the big problem is still room acoustics. And I think it kind of goes back to these questions about qualities of microphones. I've heard it said many times that, you know, an incredibly good microphone in a bad room is going to sound like a really bad room, you know. So there's an argument to be made that your room acoustics and your treatment of the room itself is actually more important, or should take precedence over the investment in microphones and preamplification.
Who else has got a question for us?
Graham, I have a question on DAWs.
Hey, Steve.
Relatively new, and am I cheating by using a free DAW like Audacity or GarageBand or something like that? Am I getting less than professional, modifications or whatever, and I'm not spending money on a DAW? I kind of feel guilty about using free software, and I don't know if I should.
I love it. Feeling guilty.
Must be Canadian.
Hey.
I can say that. I'm sitting in Toronto. I'm Canadian, so.
I'll take a shot at that. Absolutely not, man. Audacity is a very capable audio workstation. There's another one called Reaper, which is free to try, and then if you're just a one-man shop, it's like $60 to buy, and I use that one as well. They're very capable. There's no reason that you've got to spend a lot of money on a DAW. Now, later on, you may want to, if you're starting to find that you want to use some more plugins, because some are better than others. But no, you're not cheating. Absolutely not.
Okay, I got to chime in. Big Reaper fan. Get Reaper. You won't regret it. Spend time.
Hey, James, how you doing? How you doing, man?
I'm doing. Spend time to learn what it will do. Reaper is a wonderful program, and you can configure it specifically for voiceover. You can strip it down, take all the MIDI stuff away, strip down all the bells and whistles just specifically for voiceover. I'm teaching classes at the SAG-VO lab in New York City on Reaper because so many people are interested in using it. Audible Studios switched over from Pro Tools to Reaper as their go-to DAW. Get Reaper. You won't regret it.
James, are you doing any online webinars or anything like that?
Not yet. I haven't figured out how to do that, but Stephen Gonzalez has on Stephen Gonzalez VO on YouTube has a series of Reaper videos for Mac and PC, how to install it, how to get the plugins, what you need to do, and they're very, very comprehensive.
And that guy knows his stuff, let me tell you.
And we are very, very good friends. We trade information all the time. He helps me when I have questions, and I do things for him too.
Okay, so once again, to summarize then, Reaper, I mean, I know enough about Reaper to know it's every bit as powerful as Pro Tools, and in some...
And if you want to, you can make it look like Pro Tools. If you like the Pro Tools interface, the GUI, you can make it look like Pro Tools if you want to. If you miss Pro Tools that much, you can make it look like Pro Tools.
I played with it a little bit with using the Pro Tools skin, and you could make it look like virtually indistinguishable from a Pro Tools
session. You can make it look like Pro Tools. You can make it look like Ableton Live. You can make it look like Studio One. You can make it look like anything that you're used to. But it's an incredibly powerful program. To install it takes about 2 seconds, and I'm not joking. It's virtually 2 seconds. It is a very small and compact program. And if you got it right now, it's at 5.61, I think, right now. For the $60 fee, for the licensing fee, you're good until 7.0, which could take years.
They're up to 5.62, by the way.
What?
5.6.2 is the current version.
Okay, I'm going to have to get that then.
I'm with James as well. I think Reaper is absolutely fantastic.
I mean, Reaper does have a steep learning curve, but once you have that aha moment, you will never go back to anything else. Audacity is a fine program. The biggest downside with Audacity, 2 big downsides. One is the destructive editing feature. Once you cut something out, it's gone. The other is you can't listen to the processing in real time. You have to actually render the file to listen to what it's actually going to sound like when you add all the processing. So you're guessing. In Reaper, you can click these things on and listen to it in real time, saying, "Oh, I don't like that EQ. Let me mess around with that," and it will do it in real time, just like the big boys do.
James, give us just 60 seconds about destructive editing versus the alternative.
Okay, with destructive editing, if you're taking something like Audacity, and say that you've recorded, and you made a mistake, and you want to go back and you want to fix that mistake. So you're doing either a punch and roll, or you're just cutting something in. Whatever you're cutting in is taking the place of that recording, and the recording that you had is gone.
It's overwriting it.
It's overwriting it, and it is gone. You can't get it back unless you do an undo. So if you've made a mistake like 30 takes ago, and you want to get that take back, you won't be able to do it.
So what's the alternative?
The alternative is to work on a copy of the file. That way you have the original file, and if you've made edits or if you've re-recorded some things, you can cut and paste from the original file if you need that. Now with programs that do non-destructive editing, everything that you record is always there. You may not see it all the time, but all of the material is there somewhere on your computer, because what you're looking at is not actually the waveform. It's a representation of what you've recorded. It is actually, it's like, what are the icons that are on your thing that have the little arrows on them? It's a placeholder.
A shortcut.
Yeah, shortcut. So what you're seeing is actually a shortcut to the actual file that's stored on your computer somewhere. And all that information is still there. It's still usable. You haven't lost anything.
And name us a couple of DAWs that are non-destructive in their editing.
Non-destructive: Reaper, you got Pro Tools, you've got Studio One, you've got
Adobe Audition is non-destructive.
Adobe Audition is non-destructive. And when you're messing around with things like RX6, if you're manipulating files in RX6, that's non-destructive too. All of it's still there. Destructive editing programs are things like Audacity. I think
Twisted Wave is
destructive, but that's totally Mac.
James, I have a question.
Sure.
Hi. On Audacity, I do like I don't know, Control Z, and I can go back on Audacity and undo.
That's an undo. Yeah, you can undo, but that's the only way you're going to get the information back.
Yeah.
In Reaper, because you have all the information is there. All you need to do is stretch out the waveform. So if you've cut in to a certain place, say that you're doing a pickup and you're cutting in at the end of something you just recorded, and you want to cut in to a place before what you've previously recorded ends, you're just overlapping that. If you stretch the waveform back and forth, you will see that all of that information is still there. It doesn't happen that way in Audacity. You're overwriting and you're losing the information in Audacity unless you undo.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Just before we move on, I want to once again acknowledge VoiceZam for being kind enough to sponsor tonight and allowing me to try and defray some of the costs of putting this on. Thank you very much to Bob at VoiceZam. VoiceZam is this very cool, a very cool platform that allows you to take your existing commercial or narration demo and split it up into the separate sections that constitute, or separate segments that constitute your overall demo, so that people who are listening to your demo can listen to the entire thing. Who's doing the dishes, I wonder? Got it. There we go. Anyway, so VoiceZam, I highly recommend it. Go and give it a try. Normally, there's a 2-week trial period. Bob is willing to double that 2-week trial period to a full month for you to try it out. Lots of tutorial videos there. Use promo code OpenMic, OPENMIC, when you are when you're signing up. So back to the conversations about technology, and Alicia's asking a question through the Q&A box. Wants to know what others are using to read their scripts from. At this time, she's actually printing it out and taping it, she says, to a board. Need to know what others use for longer scripts. I mean, I can't remember the last time I printed a script. I just save them as PDFs and I read them off my iPad. And I've got this very cool stand in my booth that my iPad affixes to. It's got a special frame on my iPad, and it affixes magnetically to this stand, so that I can just take my iPad and go poof, and it just sticks to this stand in my booth, and I can read from it. Who else is using iPads, or what are some other suggestions that we could give to Alicia when it comes to reading her scripts in the booth?
I have a second monitor on my studio PC that I've got on a raised platform so that it's higher. And I just simply put the PDF on that second monitor, put my mouse over that window and pick the mouse up and use the scroll wheel to scroll through the file as I'm moving through the text. Very cool. And is it a huge monitor, or are you just using like a little 20-inch? Or? Yeah, no, it's not very big. I think it's a 20-inch. But I can get 2 pages side by side on the screen in a PDF viewer and put it in scroll mode, so it works quite well. I also have a holder for my iPad or Windows tablet or whatever that I occasionally use, but I find myself using the monitor mostly.
How are you able to mark your scripts? If it's on an iPad, you can't mark it with a pencil like you would a paper script.
There's a program called iAnnotate. ANNOT. Thank you. iAnnotate. You can figure out how to spell it. And it allows me to do anything, any sort of markup that I could do with a pen and paper, I can do using iAnnotate. So you might want to check that out. And that's not the
That's interesting. I did not know that was available. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's not the only PDF markup app that you can get for iOS. And I'm sure that there's lots available for other operating systems as well. Yeah, for Windows, it's easy to annotate on a PDF file in Windows.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, just making some notes here. Who else has got a question for us?
Yeah, Graham.
Hey, you doing, Trey?
Oh, fine. Thanks a lot. Thank you for your input back to me.
Oh, no problem. Trey was asking for some advice on some plugins. I gave him a list of some stuff I use. So, yeah, Trey, the Universal Audio platform is amazing. I really, really like their plugins.
I'm looking at buying an Apollo Quad, and as my communication with you indicated, I'm looking for inputs from everybody who's been using these plugins to determine which extra ones I want to buy with it, since through December, UA has a bit of a special incentive on that.
Anybody out there other than me using the Universal Audio platform, so the Apollo rack mount or the Apollo Twin, which is the kind of more desktop version of the Trey, I should mention, I don't think you need a quad. I mean, we are literally using 1 and 2 channels and mono single voice tracks. I have a Duo, and I've never run out of processing.
Okay.
So you can probably save yourself a little bit of money if you wanted to just get the Duo. I have never run out of processing power.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think the question for me is, to what extent, I mean, what plugins do I need? Do I need to compress? Do I need reverberation? Or is that all stuff that's done post-production in other people's studios? I mean, obviously there'll be times when I'm going to want to process a little bit, but yeah.
Never put reverb on a voiceover. Never.
Okay. Good advice. No reverb, but a little. I mean, what plugins do we use? It's a pretty limited set, I would think. And the UA plugins.
What you want in the way of plugins is to make you sound like you, but clean. You don't want anything that's going to manipulate your voice so you don't sound like you. What a client wants when they hire you is you. They want you to sound like you.
Yeah, Trey, you had mentioned to me in that email that you sent that you were thinking about the Little Labs Voice of God plugin. I would really recommend you not get that, because it makes you sound like, you know, FM DJ guy. And that's not a sound that casting directors are looking for at this point. If anything, I'm rolling off the bottom end of my voice. I'm not trying to enhance it. Believe me, if you're a voice of God, you don't need the Voice of God plugin to sound that way. Either you sound like Don LaFontaine or you don't. And there's no plugin that's going to... I wish there was a Don LaFontaine plugin, but unfortunately there's not.
I'm smiling.
I use a gate and a compression, and any good DAW's already got that built into it.
Yeah, I use an expander a little bit sometimes, because I've got a street just outside my studio and I can't do much about the road noise. So sometimes I use a little bit of expansion. I use an equalizer, but only as a high pass filter to roll off all of anything below about 80 or 90 hertz. I roll it all off steeply so that none of the rumble from the streetcars and stuff makes it into my recordings. Yeah, I put a little bit of compression on it, and that's about it.
Could you talk a little bit about how you use an expansion to reduce background noise? I know RX 6 and 5 and 6, for instance, have all kinds of almost magical noise reduction. I mean, as far as plugins go, I mean, that would be one that would probably be good to have. But I'm not really familiar with using an expander. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, an expander is a compressor in reverse. What a compressor does is that it takes the highest peaks of your audio signal and chops off the peaks and just kind of squashes it all down so that there's less dynamic range. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. So what an expander does, and this compression happens, there's two variables. One is at what point is it going to start compressing? And the second variable is how much is it going to compress by? So What an expander does is the opposite, is that it takes the lower, like the lowest volume signals and makes them even lower. Instead of taking the highest volume signals and squashing them, it takes the lowest volume signals and makes them smaller and makes them lower. So therefore, the time in between words and sentences, it reduces the volume automatically in those little sections. That's what an expander does. And all a gate is an expander that cuts out the noise entirely. It's either open and it lets everything through, or it's shut and it doesn't let anything through. It's just complete silence when the gate is closed.
And expanders are very tricky to use because you get this thing called a pumping effect.
Yeah.
And what that is like sitting in a dark room and flicking the light switch on and off and on and off and on and off. So the human ear hears something and the mind hears something, and all of a sudden there is absolutely no sound. And that, well, when I went to audio engineering school, we were warned against the gates because it makes a listener anxious, and they don't know why.
Yeah, that's why I don't use a gate. And, I do use an expander, but, James, I've been at this a little while now. I've been voice actor for 7 or 8 years, and I'm pretty judicious in how I go about using it. But yeah, I don't think that an expander is something for, people who are brand new to the business to start messing with very much. In those cases, they're probably better off going with noise reduction in Adobe Audition, or noise reduction using a plugin from the iZotope RX6 collection.
Yeah, and I use a gate, but what I do, I use it for basically for breath reduction. I don't take the breaths totally out because I mix a little bit of the signal back in. So it's not completely silent, but it's attenuated.
Mm-hmm.
James, that's exactly what I'm doing as well. Yeah.
There is actually a great Waves plugin called Debreath, and I thought it was, there's no way it's going to be able to tell the difference between a breath and a word, and it's going to make a mess out of my recordings. It is awesome.
Yeah, it works. It doesn't catch everything. It catches about 90% of everything.
I don't know what algorithm they're using that makes this plugin just inherently know the difference between my breaths and when I'm vocalizing a word, but it does.
Yeah.
And as you said, 90% plus it catches and does a great job.
You can mix in a little bit of the wet signal and the dry signal together so you don't completely eliminate that ambient sound of a breath.
Absolutely. Well, and you can tell it by how many dB you want it to reduce it anyway. So you don't even need to do that. You can just say reduce breaths by 12 dB and it just does it all from there. It's a pretty cool plugin for sure.
Graham, is that plugin compatible with most DAWs?
It is.
Okay.
It is. I can't think of any kind of mainstream DAW that doesn't accept VST plugins. Does it, James, you're pretty knowledgeable about this stuff. Can you think of any DAW that doesn't really?
Especially the VST2s. A lot of DAWs don't deal with the VST3s. It depends on whether it's 32-bit or 64-bit, which we're getting into a whole bunch of, we're really getting into the weeds of that kind of stuff. But the put up getting the Waves Debreather until it goes on sale, because you can get it for $29.
Yeah. It's too bad because it was just on sale. They were selling the entire vocal package, which includes Debreath, for I think it was $59, and it's normally $299. It was a great deal.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Who else has got a question for us tonight?
Got a studio question.
Hey, Trey.
I'm in the process of putting together a custom studio in the house in a full room, and I'd like to have some ideas about how to handle the one window that I have now, as opposed to totally covering it. Any suggestions on sound?
I saw a very interesting thing called an indow, INDOW, and you mail them the dimensions of the window, and it has a rubber compression fitting around the edges, and they basically custom make them, and then you just stick it in the window. And the demonstrations that I saw were really remarkable at reducing outside noise. It's an indow, I-N-D-O-W.
So, William, it's literally a plug, right, that fits into the window while you're recording, and then you can take it out afterwards. Is that correct?
No, well, you could take it out, but it's clear. It's, I guess, plexi. So it actually, you know, it has thermal characteristics too, but I was really surprised at how well it handled sound reduction from outside. I'm considering getting them for my own house.
Now that's cool. Like, I have heard of people custom making, you know, plugs which are the exact size of the window, and they literally just kind of put it into the window frame while they're recording, but it's not clear. I mean, it's made of fiberglass, etc. So the fact that this thing you can still see out your window is pretty darn cool.
And they do stress the noise reduction characteristics of it. It's worth INDOW. Just Google it, and they have some very interesting demos.
I am definitely going to do that when we're done here tonight. That is very cool.
Oh, thanks a lot.
They call it an 18.9 decibel reduction. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be more than good enough for your home studio situation, I would think. So
I covered my window with acoustic sheetrock, so it's kind of permanent and doesn't look great, but it works.
Yeah, that's why the plug is nice, right? Because you can just set it into the window well when you're recording, and then you can take it out and put it into a closet when you're not actually recording.
Please don't tell my wife about that plug.
Yeah, because she's still trying to get over the shock of having the entire window sheetrocked over, is she?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Say, Mike, did you use the kind of sheetrock that's got that sandwich layer in it?
Yeah, I used actual acoustic. What's the Acoustamass? Maybe. Let me see if I can.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see the actual name on the sheetrock, but it's available at Home Depot, Lowe's. It's a instead of one layer of sheetrock, it's basically two half-thin layers of sheetrock,
right?
That are extra high density to absorb those vibrations.
Okay.
I actually got kind of crazy, and from the outside you can't tell that I've done anything to this window because there's leveler blinds in the window opening on the inside, but then inside that I shoved a white comforter filling up the entire opening, and then I covered that with particle board and covered that with the acoustic sheetrock. So it's dead as a doornail. You don't hear anything coming through that window.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I still think it's funny though that your wife was less than happy with you about it.
She's okay because it's my studio. We don't use this room for anything else, so it's fine.
And as long as it doesn't look too weird from the outside, that's all that matters.
You absolutely cannot tell from the outside, so I'm good there.
I thought you were going to say, Mike, that you put a painting in there of people. People from the outside could look in and see something very strange. You know,
that's a good idea, actually.
JD asked a question, and I just wanted to get it in before we start to wrap up. I'm not sure, she or he, is asking what type of interfaces people are using. Apparently, lots of people like the Focusrite Scarlet. They're specifically using the Yamaha AG03, which is just a fantastic little unit for, I think it's $149 or something, and it just kicks ass. It's just a wonderful little unit. What other interfaces are people using? I'm using an Apollo. What are some of the other interfaces out there?
Well, I have a Tascam, but it's a 16-channel interface, so it's way overkill for voiceover. But as I mentioned, I'm a musician, so I use it for multi-track as well.
I had to make a decision between the Apollo and the RME, the Babyface Pro, which is very small. I'm not sure, is the Apollo available for PC, or is that straight Thunderbolt Mac?
No, they do have a PC version of it, but they don't do a very good job of supporting it. So I wouldn't recommend the PC version of the Apollo for people running Windows.
So I did go with the RME Babyface Pro, mostly because the preamplifiers are supposed to be very, very good. And I was looking for a portable solution. But for an inexpensive interface, I can't recommend the Native Instruments. They have several. There's a Session, there's a Mobile. They're very small and really super high quality. Converters and very good preamps as well.
RME is a German company, and it probably makes some of the best interfaces in the world. They are phenomenal. Are they overkill for us in voiceover? Maybe, but they are phenomenal, and the things are bulletproof as well. There's one other company I really like, and that's Sound Devices, and they're best known for making field mixers and stuff for, you know, when they're trying to record audio for films out in, you know, on location, and they got these field mixers. So again, they have to be indestructible, but they make some good stuff for that is usable for voice actors as well. But you pay for it. Like RME is an expensive product, and Sound Devices is even more expensive.
Well, I was, again, as an interface, I was going to recommend Native Instruments. It's another German company, and they basically make huge suites of plugins, but and virtual instruments. But they do have a hardware line that's, you know, you can pick them up used. I can't remember off the top of my head what the series is called, Session and Mobile, and I've been using those for several years, and they're under $200 and really, again, bulletproof, as you said. But I wanted to ask about Sound Devices, because the biggest problem that I have is fan noise from a computer, and short of putting it in the other room and running long cables, which is probably the easiest and smartest thing to do. I was wondering about Sound Devices now makes, you know, they make a field recorder that I guess, I mean, it's all solid state, so you wouldn't have the issues of fan noise and whirling hard drives and so on. It would be a silent, something you could just go sit in the closet with.
The thing about the fans in your computer is that the cooling isn't being done on the moving hard drives. The cooling's being done on the CPU. So if you're still going to have a computer somewhere, I guess, capturing this stuff, although I guess if it's a field recorder, you could just, but then what you're going to have to do is just the files all get dumped onto this solid state drive inside the field recorder, which you're then going to have to input into your computer and do the editing. It just sounds like an extra step. Yeah, I would just run the longer cables.
Just get a long wire. Yeah, that's.
You can also get specially built boxes that are meant for CPUs to fit into, and they deaden the sound, and they often have their own fans, but their fans are specifically made to be very, very, very quiet. They rotate slower, but they are usually much bigger, so they don't make any noise. So you might want to consider one of these isolation boxes for your CPU as well. But rather than invest $500 in that, I'd invest $50 and buy a couple of longer XLR cables.
Okay, good advice.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to have to wind it up. It's just coming on 10 o'clock now. I wanted to say thanks again to VoiceSam for sponsoring the show. Remember to use promo code OpenMic when you're signing up to double the length of your free trial. Also want to pimp out something of mine. I've partnered with Kate McClanahan, who's this excellent coach out of Los Angeles, in the Actor Sound Advice Masterclass series of webinars. And our very first one's coming up this coming Tuesday. If you are a union actor, you don't want to miss this, because we're going to be going over how you take non-union jobs and flip them to union so that you can qualify and you can get them, and you can make the appropriate contributions towards your pension and healthcare and things like that. We're going to have Tom Alleman from Falcon Paymasters and Melissa Exelberth, who's this fantastic actor. X is awesome. I've sat with her on a number of panels at conferences, and she's a very busy actor, and over half of her income in 2017 is going to come from non-union jobs that she flipped to union. I mean, that's incredible. So definitely, if you want to check that out, I'll be sending out an email to everybody tomorrow morning that will detail how you can go about participating. But it's like $39. It's on Tuesday night, and you could earn your money back on that within 1/10 of one job.
I've seen that, Graham. Is it possible that would be recorded in order to be made available to people that can't make it on Tuesday?
Yes, it is going to be recorded, and so you just would need to sign up, and the recording is going to be made available to everybody. So if you sign up, even if you're not there live, you'll get a link to the recording.
Okay, many thanks.
Fantastic. So that's it. Until next Sunday, work hard, audition a ton, and get lots of work. We'll talk to you next week. Good night, everybody.